He was the most fascinating of all those characters, I think.
Yeah.
But Grant, he was a most unlikely candidate to be ultimately the commander-in-chief of the Union Army and President of the United States, for that matter. I mean, when they sent him to West Point, the people of his town said they were embarrassed that they had sent such a creature. He was essentially an indifferent student. He was at the bottom of his class, not the total bottom, but he was down there. And he did, in fact, perform very well in the Mexican War, but he was a quartermaster. They wouldn't give him top infantry or cavalry jobs, but he was very brave. And then he, of course, continued in the Army, and he wound up out in California drinking a lot, and it got him in trouble, and he essentially had to resign from the Army, and then he sort of bumbled along on a series of jobs, real estate salesman and failed farmer, and he wound up working for his father in a leather goods store in Ohio. And when the war broke out, he could not seem to get a commission in the regular Army, but the governor of the state gave him a commission to train recruits, and he did it so well that they gave him more recruits until finally he had what constituted a brigade, and that required a brigadier general. And suddenly Grant is a general. Now, general, once you reach the rank of general, you're up in the stellar group of commanders. It's quite different from the jump from colonel to general. And the generals have essentially the commands of their own. I mean, they do what they want to do within reason. And Grant clearly saw, whereas some of the other Union commanders did not see, that an offensive, forceful move out of the Cairo, Illinois, which was the sort of jumping off point, down some way down the Mississippi River Valley, either the Mississippi River or the Tennessee River, one of those rivers. Grant was determined that he was going to have an amphibious operation, and this was almost unheard of. But he got along well with the Navy, and they had the transport to take his army, hundreds of the vessels, and they had ironclad boats to protect them. Sherman was brilliant. I read his writings and I marvel at them. He's sort of like Lindbergh. He really has a gift for gab, or a gift for writing, and he's a very smart guy. He's intellectual, but he was essentially, he didn't show it. But I mean, he was gruff. He wasn't a pretentious intellectual. Sherman, he married well, but he too got out of the Army because he couldn't make a living in it. Wound up, he was a president of a bank. That failed, and then he was a president of a streetcar company. But when the war came along, he immediately was made a colonel in the regular Army, and he fought at Manassas, first Manassas, and wound up, unfortunately, making a statement that got him in a lot of trouble. The Secretary of War was visiting his command in Kentucky, and Secretary of War asked him, how many people do you think it will take to subdue this rebellion in the Mississippi River Valley? And Sherman told him he thought it would take 250,000 men. There weren't 250,000 men in the entire Army at that point. And this news got back through the Secretary of War to the newspapers, having the Secretary of War suggested that this was a crazy idea, and the newspapers seized on that and said Sherman was crazy and that he was insane and so on. And it literally drove him from his command, and he wound up getting his command back as a quartermaster, essentially what Grant used to be. But he was so good that Grant, they functioned very well together, and Grant then made him his second in command at Shiloh.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and a leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.